Hi everybody, welcome to today's Cosmic Chat. I am so excited that Michael Stasko is going to be joining me. We are here to talk about forgiveness today and to awaken forgiveness and to awaken freedom and self-love. And Michael is going to share with us how to do that. So I'm going to add Michael right now. If anyone has my other chat with Michael or has heard of him, Michael Stasko was working and serving with and learning from Amma Sri Karunamayi for at least 10 years in and out of India. He, in his own right, carries such a beautiful energy of love and spirituality and seeing things in a deeper way. So, Michael, I was just sharing a little bit about you. I spoke about how you were with Amma for pretty much 10 years, serving and sharing and traveling around the world, sharing this spiritual energy, this heart energy, and now you really carry it into the work that you do as a spiritual growth coach. And I know you also teach meditation classes and workshops. Your signature workshop is called Bloom, correct?
That's correct.
So, by the way, you have one coming up, right?
I do. I'd be happy to tell you maybe more about that at the end of the talk, if you're curious. But yes, up in end of April.
In the end of April. And so is there anything that you wanted to add to introduce yourself to the Cosmic Chats community? Besides what I've shared so far, I shared a little bit about you before you came on, but...
Yes, I think you've got everything. Honored to be here with you again on Cosmic Chats, and looking forward to sharing. So I think you've pretty much summed up most of the things about me that I would say. So happy to, again, happy to be here and talk about forgiveness.
Amazing. And for anyone who hasn't joined before, my name is Debbie Sugarbaker, and I am the host of the Cosmic Chats, which is an Instagram live series. And it is also a podcast that you can find on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, on Apple Podcasts, on all the major platforms. So I get to interview individuals from all different walks of life who are elevating consciousness in one way or another, be it around medicine and healing, be it around spirituality, like Michael. There's just, I've had some incredible people on my podcast who have a lot to share, a lot of energy and wisdom to bring. So today we are talking about forgiveness. And Michael, I wanted to ask you, what in your mind, forgiveness is one of the most powerful, probably, capacities that we have as a human being, right? It's something that I don't think animals have the ability to forgive, to go above their nature in that way. So it's really something that's uniquely human and definitely not the easiest thing. What can you tell us about forgiveness? What is it or what is it not?
That's a great question. And I'm going to recall the title of this talk, I believe, is Forgiveness, Keys to Freedom and Self-Love. So I'll be sure to try to tie that in. Forgiveness is essential for our spiritual growth and what we experience as humans. I think you also just had mentioned that perhaps it's a unique capacity that humans have. And what we also have as humans is a tendency to carry the past, usually in an effort to preserve an identity. So before we can talk about what it is, I think it's worth noting a few of the things that we experience and what we're all really looking for. In my opinion, we're all really looking for connection, a deeper connection with ourselves, a deeper connection to whatever we want to call that, something greater than ourselves that dwells within us. And that connection we experience, we attain by integration and in some sense by rejection of the false parts of ourselves. So we have a tendency to weave a story. This is kind of the essence of a lot of different spiritual teachings. I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm much more than I think I am. However, our tendency tends to be to form narratives, a self-image, a story, and that story is based on two things. One is the past, and the second one, this is one way of looking at it at least, has to do with where we place value and where we assign things like good and bad. So these two, one is a very polarizing view of the world, and as a result ourselves, this is the good and bad, and the second one is we're going to carry around some story about ourselves that's based on the past. These two things ultimately imprison us. So forgiveness then becomes the key to freedom, because we're going to both release the past as well as these notions of good and bad. This has to do with shame. We often try to get rid of shame through judgment. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And also carrying around narratives, taking things personally. So when we take things personal, something funny happens. And we begin to separate and to also confine ourselves in some sense to something that's not who we truly are. So we attain self-love and freedom through release of those two things, those polarities of good and bad that can be very isolating and polarizing, and also by letting go of things that we at one time chose to take personal. So it's a bit
It's interesting you said that, because I was just recently reading a book called The Pathway to Surrender, which was actually recommended to me by someone. It's by, I believe it's Daniel Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins.
David
And
Hawkins.
basically,
Letting go.
yeah, letting go. So he talks a lot about how, like you said, like from the mind's perspective, we like to see this is good and this is bad, and this happened to me, and this was a positive and this was a negative. But from an energetic perspective, it's all about energies, right? And energies that are kind of arising within me, and maybe that is a different way to look at it, more energetically rather than, from the perspective of the mind. Just putting that out there.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like,
And
this anger is awakened in me, so let me release this, regardless of the situation. When you squeeze an orange juice comes out. So I'm being squeezed. I have some anger and resentment that's coming up. So how can I release these energies from me without attaching too much to the story?
mm-hmm. Yeah, the book Debbie's referring to is Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. Funny, I have it on my nightstand. I'm actually going through it right now.
Wow.
I had the pleasure of meeting him about 10 years ago, and I've read several of his books. But so saying very similar things, it seems that as human beings, perhaps the one thing we can all benefit more from is the ability to let go. Because at some point in our lives, we realize there's something that's no longer serving us, that we still have a problem releasing. So the trick becomes then, how do we go, how do we release those parts of ourselves that we know are no longer serving our highest? And forgiveness is a beautiful mechanism for this. So I'm going to answer your first question. You asked me, what is forgiveness and what is it not? The trick with forgiveness is like a few words in the English language, like love and some other words. I think there's a couple different interpretations. The forgiveness I'm going to be talking about today is not where I'm bestowing on someone some sort of charity where I release them from their wrongdoing, and someone says, oh my God, I've done something that was offensive or hurtful to you, please forgive me, and then I choose to pardon them. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
The forgiveness we're talking about is basically, we can think about forgiveness and reactivity in a very similar sense. Suppose in a moment, I have an interaction with someone, and they say something that could be an attack. I might choose to perceive it that way. So depending on who that person is and the amount of meaning I've given them in my story will usually determine how I react to what they're saying.
Right.
So if a little kid comes over that you've never met before, perhaps a small child, and they say something like, I don't like your shoes, I think they're very ugly, and then you completely do not take this personal. You think this is a child, maybe they're having a bad day, all those kind of things. So I'm free from forming a narrative about myself based on what's happened. This is like in real time.
Right.
I can do the same with an adult, but if that adult perhaps is my parent or a partner, then there's usually much more of my identity involved in that. So when the same words are said to me, I might have a different reaction.
Right.
The trick also is we tend to carry that with us. So forgiveness then becomes choosing to go back and kind of undo taking personal the things that I have taken personal in the past as a
Right.
way of releasing myself from the past, from a story. Because ultimately, like we said, there's some things that we recognize no longer serve us, and if we're carrying past with us, it tends to color our present perception of things, which then become our future.
Right.
So we have an opportunity with forgiveness to go back and choose to relive and review a situation through different understanding. I'll go a step further and say, if you haven't gone through the activity of forgiving your caregivers and your parents, this is perhaps one of the most powerful spiritual practices that any one of us can undertake.
Right.
Because certainly we formed our self-image by taking personal the things we experienced in childhood, primarily from people that were themselves quite whole and limited.
Right.
So what is forgiveness then? It is not this bestowing of pardoning of others. It also doesn't mean that I'm condoning someone else's actions. It's simply my choice to no longer form a narrative about myself based on something.
Wow.
This is
Wow.
important understanding, because then I become free. It's something I do for myself. It has nothing to do with anyone outside of myself. No one can give me forgiveness.
Wow. So can I just give you an example? Because that's really powerful. And so I had a situation where I felt like I wasn't treated well at all, you know? And in my mind, and I'm going to be like a little bit open here, I was like, wow, I really feel like I was like thrown like a piece of trash, you know? And actually I was telling a friend like that on the beach. I was telling a friend about it on the beach, and I used those words. And of course, it's not words that I would want to use about myself, right? Or I want to use about any human being. But that's how I felt. That's how I felt I was treated. And that's how I felt. I guess I must have felt that somehow about myself. Maybe I picked it up somewhere in childhood or whatever. But I was on the beach and I was telling a friend about this. And right as I tell him those words, about 2 seconds later, a little dog comes out of nowhere. Like, he comes running like on Santa Monica Beach, like a dog free, just comes up to me and pees on on me, like literally pees on my hip, and then runs away. And he said, like, wow, do not ever say that again. Like, do you see what the universe said? You said those words about yourself, and then look how it responds. This is what you create, for yourself. So, like you said, the process of coming into a place of forgiveness around that situation has been a process of me letting go of that narrative and perhaps the initial wound that happened where I felt like I was just tossed aside. It definitely was imprinted from somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm not sure. It really rang true with how you said it. And of course, like I said, it's like even now I'm sharing that. It's like I want to cry. I wouldn't want that's not a way that any human being should feel, but so it's interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate your sharing, and I understand. We can all feel um, used or worthless um, from time to time. So, what happens in forgiveness is we have to be authentic. It means I can't bypass what's going on and think I've arrived at forgiveness. The reason I feel pain is because I gave someone, it could be very natural, but I gave them some value in my life. I gave them a place of prominence. Uh, Ultimately, what really happened was I was searching for myself in them with a capital S. So a lot of this, what I'm going to talk about, is somewhat of a paraphrase of the content you might find in things like A Course in Miracles. But basically, when I project this, the first people I project the self on are my caregivers, the parents, self with a capital S. When I enter into adulthood, I then project this on romantic partners. In fact, a romantic partner can make you feel ways that no one else can, specifically for this reason.
Right.
So, in times of a breakup, or if someone, for whatever reason, I've given them some prominence and value in my life, then
Right.
I have to be authentic. Means where I have defined me, including the value I've given that person, I have to face the repercussions of that. So there's going to be pain, hurt, disappointment, all those things that I have to go through. So forgiveness becomes the final step in the healing process. It can't be the first step. If we never react, that's different. Someone I don't know says something, it's not personal. How could it be about me? They don't even know me. I can have that reaction.
Right.
Someone I've given great meaning to hurts me or says the same thing, then because of how much of myself is identified with them, I feel pain and all those things. So I have to go through the process of feeling through my feelings to feel everything. Shame, anger, disappointment, frustration, all those kind of things. And once I've felt through them, so they're not resisted, and at the same time, they don't have a lasting takeover of my body and mind, then I arrive at a place where I can choose to view the situation differently. I become curious about what's happened, or less likely to condemn. This is the good and bad piece. So remember, I told you that we gain so much freedom through forgiveness because it releases the past and it removes polarities of good and bad. I'll talk about that in a second. But I have to be authentic. I can't say, oh, it didn't hurt, or it's okay. That's too soon. I know, no, I did give them value. It's going to have this reverberation through my system. I'm going to feel through my feelings, and then afterwards I think, okay, what really happened here? It's only that hurt people hurt people.
Right.
So I can choose then, it's a choice, ultimately. I can choose to attempt to understand them, and at the very least, I can choose not to condemn them.
Right.
The
And also because in a way they can sometimes be like, for example, in that situation, it was like a few, it wasn't just one person. It was kind of like, coming from a work situation. It was like a whole thing that came to me, that energy, and it awakened in me a lot of like anger, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, it kind of finally gave me, like I said, wow, how could I have allowed myself to be in such a position where I thought so little of myself for those years, and that I allowed myself to kind of be stepped on or whatever, in whatever way. So in a way, the energy and the situation, when it came back in this way, I was able to say like, boom, and like, that Debbie is gone. Now I need to learn about boundaries and taking care of myself, and I deserve a lot more. So sometimes those situations can pull you into a place where you really get to know who you're, more of your big S self, right? Like your soul.
Yes, your big S self, and also your big S self, and where we've given away, where we were looking for that before in
Right.
some power. So what's
Right.
interesting is, I don't know your whole story, but I appreciate your sharing. But I think it's worthwhile talking about this because we're also in a time where um, what happens sometimes, it can happen to a middle child, it can happen to a minority, it can happen to a single person in a workplace. We sometimes have this, like, what's called like scapegoating, or like cancel culture, or all those kind of things where we decide that we're going to basically place all of the things or problems or negativity or anything about ourselves ultimately that we don't like, we'll place on someone else and then we'll banish them. This can happen. We do this as group. Racism is a part of this. This mechanism exists in many different forms, but the concept is, again, it doesn't lead to integration or growth.
Right.
So if we were to experience this, to be subject to something like this, which is very possible, some of us are minorities in this country or the countries where we live, women, or anyone can be subjected to this sort of thing. So again, the key thing is we have to feel through our feelings, because we did value, depending on how much we did, and then we can arrive at this place of choosing to undo what was once taken personal and visit it that way. So what's interesting is, this is where forgiveness also touches. So releasing the past, I think that part's kind of clear, where we form narratives that we choose to let go of. The other piece I want to talk about is that the opposite of forgiveness is typically, and this is going to lead to self-love. The opposite of forgiveness is something like condemnation or resentment or taking things personal. So when we have this attack thoughts for another person, and we all have them, if you just sit for a moment and think, who do I have resentment or attack thoughts toward? Then people will come to mind.
Right.
And it will be based on the past. So what's really happening is, the places that we, let me say it this way, the ego, the part of ourself that is a narrative or not connected to ourself with a big S, nothing wrong with the ego, it's not our enemy, but our individuality, our limited ego is placed through good and bad, through polarity. So the trick is, we begin to soften these good and bad. Why? Our desire to be good is usually based on some list of rules that come from our parents and society.
Right.
But if we want to feel connected, which is how I started the talk, to say that I think we all just really want to feel connected to ourselves deeply. If we want to feel connected, we're going to arrive there through becoming whole, not becoming good. Good is someone's definition, and we have our own unique thing that was birthed into this world. Beautiful. The world needs our uniqueness. However, we're usually combating that or balancing that against a bunch of good and bad that we learned in childhood and through society. Things that are acceptable and tolerable that we can express, and things that are not, which we will deny or repress. So the repressed parts of ourselves, we feel shame about. And if you have shame, we try to get rid of shame through judgment. There's somebody else that's the source of my difficulty or hardship, or there's someone else that has these repressed qualities that I am then going to label as bad. I judge, I ostracize, I scapegoat, and in doing so, I can then gain some relief.
Right.
Temporarily.
It's so interesting, because a lot of times, like, you see someone, especially if you're like with the empath narcissist dynamic, which a lot of people have been talking about in the last couple of years, which I know it can be extremely, extremely painful, and I know that it can be a really serious issue for people dealing with narcissists and narcissism, whatever. But something that I realized just through my own experience, having been somebody who identifies more as an empath, and then I see someone who seems to be acting like without regard, I'm like, oh, you know what? It was really a hard pill to swallow, but I realized that actually that was a shadow aspect of myself that I had tucked away and kind of disassociated from, and seeing it in this person and feeling that was actually me not wanting to see that part of myself, because it was unacceptable when I was a child, for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
behaviors that they were doing or
Mm-hmm.
saying. So that was really, really eye-opening for me, because it's the idea of the universe as our mirror, right? So what you see in somebody else, it reflects back something, either to help me to grow and to alter something within myself, or to embrace a part of myself that I maybe completely disassociated from because it wasn't acceptable in the household that I grew up in to behave like that as the middle child, or whatever the situation might be. So that's
That,
a really
that
interesting part.
we're often attracted to people that embody some of the repressed parts of ourselves because we want to find wholeness through association with our partner. Again, our romantic partner is our search, especially in the West. I feel like if you're in part of the modern Western culture,
Yeah.
I feel like we have this in our kind of, we got it through osmosis almost. We are
Right.
for ourselves, basically divine connection through our romantic partner more.
Right.
So just to go back and say, yeah, 100% I agree with what you're saying. So this search also, because if you have these repressed parts of yourself, we have some of us, we can't even always verbalize it, but many of us are on a search to be good, to find innocence and to be the good that was required in order to receive acceptance and validation from our caregivers.
Right.
Learned what was okay, what wasn't. If I
Right.
household where it was important to be punctual and structured and organized, I
Right.
became punctual, structured, and organized, and the more free-flowing, creative, unstructured parts of myself are usually then not finding expression, and I might be very well be attracted to someone that embodies those qualities.
Right.
At the same time, I might not be attracted to them. I might also feel so uncomfortable about them that I will judge those people that, and even my partner, when they get too close, once we form a bond, we
Yeah.
enter a relationship, that's usually what we argue about.
Yeah.
The things that I try to control my partner because those repressed parts of myself they're exhibiting are uncomfortable to me because I learned those things aren't okay. So
Exactly.
but when it happens with forgiveness, why it's so important is you're going to become more whole.
Right.
We cannot simultaneously love ourselves and hold feelings of resentment for someone else. It's
Right.
not. So this is a worthwhile thing to meditate on, because the only thing if I have resentment, bitterness, attack thoughts, or ill will or condemnation that I'm feeling towards someone else, those are the feelings I am going through. I'm subjecting myself to that. That
Right.
is not the same as feeling love.
Right.
So what I give is what I receive.
Right. That's so powerful. Like I remember something that my spiritual teacher Karen Berg used to say was like the punishment for jealousy and envy is the feeling itself. It's not like that feeling in itself is kind of like the hell. And recently I did like a video about it where I like found a way within myself to transform, you know, feelings like that by just speaking and getting into a vibe of blessing and like moving energy within myself with my own words. Like you can get yourself into a vibe of anything. Our words are so powerful, and we're these like infinite beings, and you just start expressing something. Like you know, if I take this candle and I'm like, wow, it's actually true. This is one of the best candles I've had in my house, and I'm so grateful for it. And it came to me via a friend, and they brought it to me, and it was, it was so unexpected, and I was kind of had a hard day, and it came out, and now it's bringing like this beautiful smell, and I'm so grateful that you can get on a roll and get yourself really into a vibe of anything, right? So that's one. If anybody wants to check out that video, I'm just throwing it out there that it was about transforming those negative feelings inside. It was one way to do it. But I know that you're bringing us another way to transform those feelings of resentment and perhaps ill will or ill thoughts.
Yeah. I think because what's going to happen is we're going to bump into it in the world. We do so many things for spirituality. We do meditation, we do yoga, we have a million practices. Some of us are also involved in a variety of other kinds of things. There's all kinds of things. But what I love about forgiveness is it's integrated. It's in the world. So as you're living your life, you're going to bump into places where you feel like condemning the other person, or you
Right.
feel like reacting.
Right.
Okay, this is it. This is the practice. There's no time when we're not on our paths. And the world, everything in our world, our body, our thoughts, our emotions, our people, our friends, our enemies, everything around us, our career, everything around the world, the meaning that we choose to give those things is what holds our separate self in place.
Right.
So we have a chance to integrate ourselves in our waking world all the time. You get on a phone call with a parent, maybe you feel triggered by them in the call. Okay, I gotta go, mom. It's been a long day. And okay, so what? Be aware. Be aware. Watch yourself. See what's going on there. So when that happens,
But that's okay. So again, you have to kind of step back from the story, because I was just thinking about, something that happened today that I was a little bit triggered by. And it's like when it really gets you, you're like, no, but that's not right. What's going on there, And so then it's very tempting to stay attached to this story. And what you're saying is you have to just kind of go within and detach from the story, right? And go within. I'm not saying that you have to put up with crap all the time and not have, boundaries for the future. But what you're saying, that in order to allow yourself a process of integration, you have to be able to kind of step back and love yourself enough to go within and say, okay, how is Debbie doing? What is that feeling that just came up, right?
yes. So when I feel triggered by something or reactive, all those things. Okay, you said a few things. What I'm going to use that trigger for, this is the choice I have. This is the work. So what does it look like? Here's the work. When I feel triggered, I use that as an opportunity to learn about myself, not about what someone else has to do or become or anything like that.
Right.
Usually when I feel triggered, I feel a need to control someone else or a
Right.
desire to react or to justify my feeling.
Right.
So instead of all those things, okay, you can be justified also. I can understand. Someone can legitimately do something that's wrong to us.
Right.
But what I want to be aware of, if I choose to practice this, is I'm not going to form a narrative and I'm not going to justify my reactions. So the second thing, okay, I hope that makes sense. So that's the work. And it will only have to do with the inside. Forgiveness has to do with the inside. It doesn't mean I don't set a boundary or I end a conversation or a relationship or that I'm always nice. That's not what we're talking about. Those are
Right.
behaviors with the outside. I'm
Right.
most concerned about how I create separateness, divisiveness with ultimately myself, but through others. How I create divisiveness if it within me through the good and bad I give others in my life.
Wow.
Yeah,
That-
this is,
That's very powerful. Like, I was at the beach the other day and I just saw like the waves coming in and going out and coming in and going out. And I said, like, life can change on a dime. I've experienced it in my life. My little brother passed away, my father within 3 months of each other, and it's like boom, the whole life can change in literally a split second. And I realized I'm holding on to stuff, but the or things come up, I get triggered. It must be, since things can happen and can change in a second, nothing really is by accident. And the reason why I'm being triggered in this way is so that me as a being, this soul, is going to have a chance to release whatever this is, or to integrate whatever another part of myself. And this is the opportunity that the universe is providing me through this person that's pushing my buttons, or, treating me in a way that I don't think is right.
that's the view. That's the view we want to take. That's the work that we have. Is the approach is okay. I'm going to enter my life with an awareness,
Right.
and then two, I'm going to choose the meaning I give things.
Right.
That's the main piece. So it's a tricky thing. And then, of course, yes, the self wants to be made whole. It wants to become integrated. And part of that is being aware of what triggers us. So we can feel triggered, we can feel what we want to become reactive, all those things very natural, and then we have an opportunity in that moment. So what happens? What's the process? This is actually from A Course in Miracles. Where in A Course in Miracles? I'm not going to remember. But we also, these are things we cover in Bloom. In Bloom. Excuse me. In a little bit more detail, but you've got the gist here. Because this, again, I think this is so important because it's going to provide you with ability to love yourself. To be loved, not even to love yourself, even to love oneself has a little bit of duality in it. The ability to become love. When you're not judging, then you have the ability to see yourself in others and love them.
Right.
That's what I mean by love. If I'm giving hierarchy, other people, some people are enemies, other people are like champions, and I have these hierarchies in my life. There's still a lot of divisiveness there. A lot of good and bad, a lot of polarity. When I start to sew that together, I'm basically bringing home parts of myself.
Right.
So, why does it bring us self-love? I think I was about to say something else. Oh, so what does it look like? Here are the steps. Sorry, I got off on a tangent. The steps are from A Course in Miracles. Actually, it's from page 401. Now I remember. It's just the beginning of the workbook part 2. It says, forgiveness is still. What does forgiveness look like? It's still, and it does nothing. Quietly does nothing. Forgiveness looks, waits, and judges not. 3 steps. So in your day-to-day interaction, this can also be what non-reactivity looks like. Looks means I'm aware. I'm observing. I'm watching. I go into a situation. I'm observing everything. Forgiveness is still, quietly does nothing. It looks, it waits, it judges not. Now suppose something happens, I feel triggered. Or someone's attacking me. Let's say verbally, in some sense. I feel verbally attacked. Usually it's more subtle than that these days, but someone might pull their attention away or be dismissive or deny eye contact. All those things are subtle attacks that can be subtly taken personal.
Right.
Go to someone, they don't say thank you. Maybe I take that personal.
Right.
So funny things. So I'm aware, and then I wait. Why do I wait? Because my knee-jerk reaction is more likely than not going to be to personalize. It's going to be to feel a certain feeling, anger,
Right.
upset, all those things. So we want to feel through the feeling. Once I've given someone meaning, and we have, listen, as long as you're in the body in this world and unenlightened, I mean, sorry to say it that way, but you know what I mean? As long as
all, and which I believe, like, as long as we're breathing, that means we still have some negativity, or if whatever you want to call it, negativity or things to work through, right?
I certainly do. So as long as we're here, we have this lesson to learn. So means we've given other people meaning, value and meaning in our lives about us, about who we are. So once that's happened, we have to face the repercussion of that. Means I'm going to feel hurt if they pull away or withdraw, or I'm going to feel angry, or I might even feel happy if they give me a lot of attention. Both of those things we can even start to like reel in a little bit, where we've somewhat given away power and those kind of things. So forgiveness is still, quietly does nothing, looks, waits, and judges not. I look, I'm aware, I'm observe, I'm watching what's happening. I wait because the reaction is going to be, depending on the meaning I've given that person, I'm going to feel a certain way. I have to feel through those feelings. So I wait for that to happen. It has to happen. Then I simply choose not to form narrative, not to personalize, and not to condemn.
Right.
When that happens, I free myself. By choosing not to imprison them in some narrative, I become free. This is the magic of forgiveness. I receive it by offering it to you. I become free by not making you something that has the power to make me define who I am.
Wow.
It's a
That's
very
actually
deep thing.
putting you in a position of even more power because
More
it shows
power.
that if you are reacting to somebody, you're giving them your power. And like you said, I really like the example about, somebody walking by and they don't say hi and you take it personally, but like that's an example where you can really know, and perhaps we've done it to many people ourselves. You're thinking about something, somebody says hi to you and you didn't hear, you kept going, whatever, and they might take it personally. Like that's a great example because it shows you how much illusion there can be in these situations and how much it's just there to show us and to help us to release something from ourselves or to see something in a different way. And when I say release something from ourselves, something that came to mind when you were speaking was like, for example, in certain dynamics that I've had where I do feel angry and triggered, if I'm really take the time to step back and I'm honest with myself, I'm like, oh, you know what? This is the same way that I used to feel in high school. The same kind of fears I used to have. The feeling state is very similar to that. And you know what? If I go back even further, and this is work that we do in theta healing, I say, you know what? That's a feeling that I had in relation to my mom or dad, or in relation to a caregiver that I felt that same way. And just being able to get that awareness can also be really helpful because then I said, this is something in my vibration. And maybe in this time, by not reacting it, I'm not going to feed that loop anymore. And I'm going to go be able to jump to a different destiny and hopefully to create something else. And of course, find ways to, and that's like what we do with the theta healing, for example, is we find ways to release those energetic patterns because they're oftentimes based on beliefs that we have about ourselves, that we have about others, that were formed at certain times, like I don't belong, or I'm always left out, or all these kinds of things.
Yeah, very nice. So I'll just say one last thing because what you just said reminded me of this in terms of forgiveness, because what might happen is we might very well be intended to go into a situation. And I recommend to people, if you know you're going to be talking to someone where there's a lot of history, then you might want to very well prepare yourself for the conversation. Say, okay, I'm going to go in very aware.
Right.
I know there might be a tendency for something to come up, da 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 da. And I'm going to just choose to come in very aware. And then you might find yourself reacting 2 seconds into the conversation.
Right.
So we have two chances to forgive. In the moment, for example, to become non-reactive in the moment. The first is, no, I remain aware enough. I remain aware. I can practice those 3 steps. I can wait. I can look, wait, and choose not to condemn or form narrative. But if I catch myself reacting, then the second chance is when I replay this situation in my mind later on. Because guaranteed, when you've become reactive with someone like that, you're going to replay this in your mind later on.
Yeah.
That's what happens. We've created more time for ourselves in some sense.
Right.
So when that happens, you have a second chance. Because what's going to happen is your tendency might be to then form a narrative about yourself based on your reaction. Oh, I wasn't strong enough. I can't believe it. I lost my shit again, and I ended up telling them like all that kind of stuff, and then we might feel kind of bad about everything and form another narrative. So your first chance is in the moment.
Right.
Non-reactivity and forgiveness kind of combined. The second chance is later on when you replay that situation. I would choose not to form a narrative that's self-deprecating or involves some sort of beating up on oneself, judging oneself after. So remember, forgiveness, if it has an opposite, it's judgment.
Right.
And condemnation. So it doesn't, it's you judging someone else outside or you judging your behavior in the moment or in the past. Those are both ways of condemning and forming division and divisiveness. So
Exactly. I mean, oftentimes, like just for myself, based on what you're saying, I'm like, you know what, Debbie, like after I react, I'm like, you know what, that probably wasn't the best thing to say. I probably didn't do that in exactly the way that I would have wanted, but I love myself anyway. And you know what? I love myself anyway. And I just start talking to myself and changing that vibe of like guilt and self-condemnation and starting to get really like feeling bad because that feeling bad is a state that's familiar, from childhood or from whatever. And so I say, okay, now it's a chance for me to really change that and just say, it's okay, I love you anyway, because I'm, go on a little rant for myself.
Yes. So it's practices are also beneficial and help. I started off talking about practice a little bit. We have meditation, we have yoga, visualization, lots of different healings and modalities, and so many practices that people engage in. And I think all of these things really get integrated when we relive a familiar situation in a different way.
Yeah.
This is gonna you can start your morning with meditation and then go into your day with an awareness so that you basically can choose. This is the main thing, actually. We have choice to condemn or not, to be judgmental or to be curious, to form a narrative or not. But that choice requires awareness. So we start the day with a practice. We bring an awareness into our day. Then as you live, you carry that awareness with you, hopefully, and you're able to exercise choice. And the second I can go into a familiar situation and relive that in a different way, I begin to integrate and to create a new version of me. This is also the basis of a lot of the things in Bloom. Because practices are amazing, but integration, I believe, happens how we live. I'm a big proponent of practice. Please, nobody misunderstand. I don't think you would. But I just know that we can't just practice and then
Right.
think doing meditation I can live kind of in this um, old way and think I'm going to continue to grow spiritually. Or I do plant medicine or something that gives me amazing insights, but then I can't integrate that by
Right.
bringing those insights into my life. So
Right.
we have to live, if we want, you're getting my 2 cents here, we will receive integration through living in a different way,
Right.
through familiar situations, which requires willingness, awareness, choice, those kind of things.
And there's no real like roadmap. It's like kind of like maybe just a mindset or a stance that you take towards life, which is that
Hmm.
I'm open and willing to grow and to be shown how I need to do that.
Yeah, I think we're all looking for something more complicated sometimes, or
Yeah.
something perhaps more linear.
Hmm.
But well, you heard my 2 cents in the beginning regarding this. I think if you haven't taken the time to go through and see how much resentment you have toward your caregivers, dead or alive, it doesn't. The stories are within us. So that's an opportunity to also go and um, relive everything and to choose to then. For me, it was the most. I think the most healing thing that happened in my life, perhaps,
Hmm.
was the days that I realized, oh, my parents were just doing the best that they could, and anything that I had, any failed expectations and soft traumas that I have surrounding childhood were not about me. They were about their inability to be different than they were, because we're not saints, basically. And even if they were saints, I might have still personalized things in a way that formed narratives a certain way. So um, I just feel like it's perhaps uh, a place we don't want to go. You also asked me earlier, why is it difficult? Because it means letting go of the you that you've become so comfortable with. And if you let go of you, means I no longer personalize something, means I'm letting a piece of myself go. Who do I become?
Right.
That is the question.
Right.
So um, there's some resistance to that, perhaps, for all of us. But usually, if that us gets heavy enough, then we decide, no, I'm ready for some growth.
Right. Yeah, because we get used to being like a little bit sarcastic, a little bit bitter, a little bit this, and it's like if I were to really let go of those things, and who would I who would I be? But it's always leveling up, right? Especially if it's letting go of something like that. like bitterness, like resentment.
Mm.
It's allowing more life force energy, I believe, into, if you think of each one of us as a vessel, it's allowing more light force energy to flow in. But we hold on to these little things because they feel familiar and they feel comfortable. And a lot of times it's just how we felt when we were little, when we were like little kids, and we
Mm.
came in, we started picking up on these things, and then that becomes our home base. You know, they say that's like what they say, we are like creatures of habit, and they've done all these studies on you know the comfort or the devil that you know, as opposed to something that you don't know, you know.
Yeah, I also think that it's a survival mechanism for basically our individuality, our egos. But the reality is, um, while we have those narratives in place, we still can't love fully. Loving myself and loving another person, they're not different things.
Right.
So when I extend love to others, it flows through me and I become the recipient of that love to which I'm giving others. If I haven't forgiven them or I'm condemning them, it's because of a lack of my ability to love myself completely.
That's such a key point, because you think like, well, if somebody did something and I forgive them, well, that means that I'm like saying it's okay, or that I don't have a boundary, or it's going to happen to me again. But if I really let go of it and I learn with that step of loving myself, that'll take care of it in itself, right?
Right, and it becomes an inner state. So if it seems too far to love someone that's done something heinous to us, at least don't make it about you. At least don't justify carrying around those things if you can.
Right.
Go and undo some of the narrative that was formed. And then when life gives you that familiar situation again, do your best to, if you choose, to remain aware and choose differently from where there'll be a tendency for the ego to want to cast everything in a familiar color.
Yeah. I feel like you'll just walk by. It'll be like if you're walking by like a flower stand and you always went to those same red roses. I mean, it's actually not the right kind of analogy, but it's just what came to mind. And that's like kind of the vibration that you're used to. If you then move yourself into a vibration, let's say, oftentimes I do this, I imagine myself, if I can't let go of something, or if I can't imagine myself in a different space, or if I can't, if I'm like, so I imagine what a person would feel like and be like, what would a Debbie be like, or if I can think of another person who holds that kind of grace, who was able to let go of something, who made it over something that I'm trying to get over, and I say like, wow, what would that vibration be like? And I kind of work vibrationally to get there. And it's like if through, and it's oftentimes through self, like what would a person who loves themselves do? Well, they would walk by those, I won't say, let's say prickly roses, and they wouldn't even pick them up. They'd go for the yellow ones instead. So it's kind of like that, but in our life situations, like eventually, if we really do the correction, I would say, or whatever kind of the correction of perception and all of the things that you've said, then it's like that situation, you'll walk by it and you won't be hooked by it any longer, because I'm no longer vibrating with that, because the part of me that was vibrating with that situation was a place, was a vibe of kind of low self-worth and thinking low of myself and not loving myself. But now that I know how to love myself, and of course I'm not saying that I'm totally there, but I'm working on it, and I'm working on the deservingness and connecting with the light that's inside of me, more than just always seeing what's wrong. And the more that I'm going into that vibe, that situation will no longer hook me, because I'm not an energetic match to it.
Amazing. Very true, all very words of wisdom and amazing. It's been a privilege and honor. Um, I think uh, I think I've said everything I would probably say about forgiveness. And the last thing, maybe in closing, is we go through these topics a lot in Bloom. It is, people always ask me, what is it? It's focused on how you live, how you relate to all those things in your world as a mechanism of becoming more integrated. Because I think this is where we want, I might have a controversial view here, I'm not sure. We want self-love, but we're not willing to let go of the places where we still have resentment and where we've still taken personal other things.
Right.
So I don't think you can have both. Resentment and bitterness are things that prevent me from being able to love more fully. And ultimately, I think self-love becomes quite perfected when myself is just kind of lost. There's no longer a me anymore. I see myself in you. There's less divisiveness, and then I can love you deeply. That ability to love another person comes from releasing them from everything else. I can't do both. It's also good to nurture ourselves and do self-care and all those kind of things. We're worthy of those things. It's an important thing. And we should grow our self-love. We should grow our love. There's no difference.
And can you do just a quick, oh, you were in still.
No, okay. It's good you stopped me. What were-
No, just on the what you were saying about self-love, that is the same as love. It's all love. So I was thinking maybe just to close out this conversation, if you wouldn't mind, even though I have a feeling that literally I can meet you only as deeply as I've met myself. Actually, I've heard you say that before.
Yeah.
Chris Kingston is saying that. I was wondering if you could do a quick like meditation, maybe something that we can to release or to just invite something in. I know everybody's in different places, but something to connect with that light and love inside, if you would.
Okay, let's do a short guided forgiveness activity. We can call it a meditation, but this will be more um, toward forgiveness. So if you're in a place where you're not driving and you're comfortable, sit down for a moment peacefully and close the eyes. Take a nice long, slow, controlled inhale through the nose as you expand the belly. Long, slow exhale out the mouth. Soften all the muscles in the stomach. Relax the shoulders, open up across the heart, open the throat, relax the jaw. One last time, long inhale through the nose, please. Slow, controlled exhale out the mouth. Just be very peaceful and aware. Think of someone you love. Feel them in your heart. Extend love to them. Feel connected and loving with them. Thank them. And now, allow your mind to become empty for a moment. And think of anyone to whom you have some resentment. Feelings of attack, bitterness, resentment. Whoever it is that comes to mind, hold them in your mind for a second. And if you choose, repeat the following things out loud. I offer you my love. those previous things that I had once taken as injustices against me, I choose now to release. They have served their purpose, and I no longer need to create divisiveness or consider you as an enemy. I love myself too much to hold any resentment in my heart. And I extend to you love and forgiveness so that I may receive it as well. There is no love but yours and mine and that of the whole universe. And now release that person from your mind and feel the love in your heart. Slowly deepen your breathing. A nice long, slow inhale through the nose. Exhale it out the mouth. And you can open your eyes.
That was so powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me in Cosmic Chats.
Thank you so much for joining again. Wow.
Debbie?
I love how you said, like, I'm releasing the whole construct. You know, the whole construct of the situation. Like, the whole construct, I no longer need it to teach me about loving myself, because now I'm allowing love in. That was such a powerful point. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, they can always feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. And Bloom is coming up on April 26th. I'd love to see everyone there. It's both in person or also live online and recorded. And it's 6 meetings across 3 weeks focused on integration, connection to self, which I believe is what we're all looking for through how we live in the world, our relationships, how we parent, how we view our family, how we have a relationship to our career, all of those things, behaviors, our relationships with ourselves. A beautiful course, because all those things, our romantic partners, our friendships, family, children, career, self-image, all those things are either going to reinforce an old version of us, or they'll become a mechanism for growth and healing. And Bloom is how we do that.
Wow. Very well said, and just hit everything on the head. So thank you so much again, Michael. Have a beautiful day. Thanks to everybody who joined. Love to see you too. Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaste.